Today is June 15th, 2024. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, naganago mekoche chestakom aki, or dekots nagotine siku. My name is Red Thunderwood. Oh, my name is Red Thunder Woman. Let me try that again. My married English name is Michelle Robinson. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. My DNA lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My people wore rabbit skin, so it's been referred to as the land of the Hare people. I'm native to Turtle Island, and my Dene Nation is uninvited to this area of Clincho Tine Endahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary or in Blackfoot, Mokinstis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. Acknowledging proximity to whiteness is important because the darker the skin, the more racism a person experiences. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act Imposed status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution. Having a Canadian Indian Act Imposed status card is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous people's inherent rights. My child has been trying to get their status for 2 years now. So, for folks who want to complain about how hard it is to get a passport, as an Indigenous person, I have zero sympathy for you because I think folks don't understand it's easier to get citizenship in Canada than it is for an actual Indigenous person in Canada to get their status. Indigenous Two Spirit or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ community and Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socioeconomic ladder, just underneath men for that matter, because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 31% of racialized Calgarians cannot find suitable employment. And I just went through an interesting little issue with someone saying, "Oh, no, for sure you got this job." And yeah, as soon as they did some sort of check on me, absolutely did not get that job. So it is not by chance. And I'm going to give a shout out to another podcast right now from Canada Land. It's being done by Robert Yago, and he is doing this whole series on pretend Indians. And it was really it just struck me for a whole week. I was thinking of this one episode of a non-Indigenous person who was doing Indigenous ceremony in the jail system, pretending to be Indigenous, pretending to have the rights to perform ceremonies. And so, and the other part was because they were non-Indigenous, when the 215 bodies were found, rediscovered, probably the better way to say it, and the actual Indigenous inmates were sad and mourning and painting and doing other artistic ways to talk about how it felt. It was this non-Indigenous so-called spiritual leader that not only disregarded the Indigenous person who was talking the loudest about it, they actually transferred him to maximum security prison, where he was later almost killed and will now have permanent health issues as a result of being transferred away from a guy like this. So I just bring it up because it is really important that so-called, people want to have more Indigenous workers, but yet you won't hire us. And when you do, we get fired almost immediately. So 31% of racialized people, of course, that includes Black people, brown people, other people of color. But the point is that you can't pretend you care about reconciliation while not properly hiring us and not accommodating the fact that as Indigenous people, we don't think like you as settlers. Anyway, I'm not a social worker, an elder, nor do I speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I share my knowledge as a Dene mother navigating this colonial, misogynistic, racist world in 2024. As a trauma-informed Dene woman who's attempted to run, joined harmful colonial policies or parties, spent money to be at conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow for incarceration, a denial of justice, a denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples, I have work to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today, and I hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for the so called country named Canada. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation as well as being a treaty partner. I think it's really important because it is the 15th of June to acknowledge Canada Day is coming up. And so I implore my listeners to wear orange on that day. I know prior to reconciliation, we all wore white and red, but I'm asking you to wear orange to acknowledge that Canada Day is on the backs of Indigenous peoples and that ongoing genocide. Pride Month also should not be 1 month. It's important to understand that the straight agenda and gender violence was and continues on these lands by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as a guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so called time of reconciliation. Can they be performative? Of course. I think I've talked endlessly about people being unable to even pronounce it. It's really important that your land acknowledgements have meaning. I encourage everyone to introduce themselves, acknowledging their ancestors, stories of displacement, how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen in Canada, a refugee, or other land displacement. So we as Indigenous people know how safe you are to be around. If you don't know how to pronounce your local Indigenous nations' names, you won't pronounce your pronouns, or you won't say your pronouns, you won't say your story of origin, acknowledge stolen lands, acknowledge imposed economic oppression, or your role in reconciliation. I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself, because we face the most colonial violence based on the ignorance, or worse, willful anti-Indigenous biases of Canadians. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101, because it immediately addresses all of this colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves native Calgarians or whatever town you're from, you show me you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winty's book, Unreconciled, explains this perfectly, as do many Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by capitalism and colonialism, but it'd be a part of a treaty partnership, part of meaningful reconciliation, not just this performative crap, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed US-Canadian border are the Blackfeet, or Amska-Bibigani, and north of the border are the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Goodstoney, formerly Wesley, the Chiniki and Bearspaw nations of the Stoney Nations, or they like to be called the Yiharhi Nakoda. And of course, the Dene from Sutina. Those are my cousins. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit status, and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you could pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, giving a review helps whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel. You can go and subscribe, or you can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. So this morning, Calgary finally declared a state of emergency. It's been very interesting because this actually happened last week, this pipe burst. And at the time, I was in the middle of this Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference. And so I was surprised to see the mayor there. I was surprised to see some of the councillors there, because we were having a serious emergency. And nobody wanted to call it an emergency yet. So it was, anyway, so today, finally, a week later, for a whole week, they've been asking us to reduce our water usage by 25%. So, try not to flush that often. try to do Navy style showers where you turn on the water, turn it off, lather up, and then turn it on just to rinse off. And, just little things you can do to reduce your water. Not water your lawns, don't wash your car, things like that. Those were things that was like, oh, that should be easy to do. So, like, I just let the bedding kind of stack up. And, that was the other thing. It was funny because they said, please don't do dishes unless you have a full load, or if you're going to do a load of laundry, make sure it's full. And I'm like, I have like 4 people who live in a house. I cannot imagine a half load of laundry being done in this house ever. So it's kind of funny because I'm like, who does half washes? My God. Anyway, you don't need to message me and let me know. I do have loans because of whatever reason you have. I'm not really interested. I'm just shocked because, as a mom, I'm always have a pile of laundry, always have dishes to do. That like it never ends. So, and I have dogs, so like the cleaning is just always it's a constant going. Anyway, so it's been interesting because they've been telling everybody what you know what let's just say this from the moment it happened, Calgarians were going off about conspiracies. The people who are convinced that there's a 15-minute city conspiracy, they were convinced this was the, not the red flag, this was the false flag to start initiating lockdowns and such, right? Because they truly think that they are oppressed as settlers in Canada. So it was kind of interesting reading that, thinking, are you kidding? And there were really some conservatives that were like, well, I'm just going to have a full shower to own the libs. And I'm like, oh my God, this is really your thinking. So, what I have learned, what I do know is this. Um, for those of you who know who I am, I was born in Calgary in 1977. In that time, Deerfoot wasn't fully the way it is today. We have over 1 million people now, but at that time we had under 500,000. And so I was reading on Facebook a woman who was living in Bowness for 67 years, and she didn't actually even have clean drinking water for a long time. They had just put it in. And my family had moved over to Montgomery. And at that time, I know they had done a whole bunch of work on the waters and such. And I only know that because this is a really like silly thing, but a little boy had passed away. And my dad said, don't play on those pipes. And like they were monster, right? And they were the feeders going into the bow. So that was a long, long time ago. So that would have been, I don't know, 80, 81, something like that. So there's 2 main pipes that come into the city. And the Glenmore Reservoir is like where 40% of our water comes from. And the other one, the Bear's Paw Pipe, that's what broke. And because of that, it was apparently due for inspection in September. So it just busted sooner. And I know something I learned from all the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I spoke to all these mayors and councillors all across Canada. Everyone across Canada is having potholes and infrastructure issues. So the last winter, like, just seemed to really accelerate all of that. So I'd be really curious when they find out the source of why all of this happened, like how it came to be. But anyway, when they finally dug in there and really had a look at the damage, they realized as of like yesterday, this is going to be longer than a week. This is going to be like 5 weeks. And so we have to be ready for that. And by declaring a state of emergency, now they can turn off the taps if they need to. If we are using too much water, if we are consuming too much water, they can just turn off the taps. And so a lot of people, understandably, are kind of pissed because the restrictions aren't necessarily the same for business, but conversely, like the Bowness businesses are not doing well because everybody was just trying to avoid the area in general. So they were asking people to still come to Bowness and to spend some money because it was really hurting the businesses there. Conversely, there still is there's still the show's gonna go on when it comes to the Calgary Stampede. So like I'm in 2013, we did not cancel the Stampede. In fact, the opposite. We're all like, we're gonna pull together, we're gonna have Stampede. So there's been some interesting and funny and hysterical and sad but true kind of memes going around on Twitter. That's kind of where I love to see everybody's thoughts and opinions, because you kind of get to see what people are doing. So I started this thread kind of talking about some of the things, and pulled out my dog's swimming pool and put it under the drain pipe because we're getting a lot of rain today, like a ton of rain. So I have a wheelbarrow for this one eaves trough that needs like fixing. Anyway, it like I must have emptied that wheelbarrow like 8 times already today. So that's good. But my dog pool is full. So yeah, if you know where I live and you come to my front and you see that dog pool, please don't hesitate to bring some containers and take that water, because I filled up all of my containers that I had in the house just so that I could use it for watering plants and such for the next 5 weeks, because we are going to have some pretty major water restrictions for the next 5 weeks. And but there's some, I know we have a ton of engineers in this city and we're working on solutions. So I do have faith in the city. I know a lot of people don't, but I believe in. I think it's because I know we're not First Nation res. I know that. So everyone's going to work really hard to get us water. And I mean, that's been brought up repeatedly, that this is the reality a lot of Indigenous people face anyway. So I just find it interesting seeing people's reaction to it, the entitlement from a lot of people. Like, I remember when they shut down Center Street Bridge for 2 years on construction when I lived there. Then we have the flood. Then we had COVID. Now we have this. I'm just sad that there's so many selfish people. But don't worry, the convoy folks that are still just outside of the city are still there, putting up structures and not being harassed at all by the police. So don't worry about that. And the court of what happened at Coots border is happening, where they actually had undercover cops on record finding out these mofos were going to kill them and like stockpiling weapons and such. And I just can't believe the amount of violence I've seen against student Palestinian encampments across the country and in the US. Meanwhile, these like yahoos were allowed to literally be conspiring to kill RCMP, and it was cool beans. It's cool beans. It's all cool beans. Like I will never understand that. And their leaders are now like going across the country and making money. This Tamara Leach from Medicine Hat. It is just incredible to me that, the standard, the different standard, whether you're non-Indigenous or Indigenous, how you get treated in this country. It is incredible. If you're a person of color, if you're not a person of color, it's incredible. There is such and like I'm a third class citizen. People of color are second class, and then clearly, white supremacy at the top. It's incredible to me how anybody could deny that. So anyway, I want to give a massive shout out to the Confederacy of Treaty 6, specifically my friend Miranda Jimmy, who does the intergovernmental relations. She was the one who gave me access to go to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference with her. And I just had a ton of fun. I had a lot of fun, like sitting there going, oh my God, what's going on here? So I wanted to give a shout out to, and I really encourage people to follow CP Planning. Now it has an orange background and a kind of infinity symbol in it. And they've been doing really great work. It's executive director, Cheryl, she does this anti-Black racism. She's worked with the Toronto City to create a 10-year action plan to focus on anti-Black racism. They have like roadmaps on anti-racism work. So like, please follow them. If you're not going to follow AROC, so that's the community-wise group here, it does the anti-racism work for organizational change. It's been free, available for all Calgarians, and Calgarians are like, oh my God, I had no idea. Oh, it's so brand new to me. And I'm like, I've literally said this like, how many times a year to you all. So anyway, if you don't want to take that because, that's too local, maybe try CP planning. They have some information about anti-racism changes when it comes to like a bigger picture. And for folks who don't understand, like if we don't focus on anti-black racism, if we don't focus on anti-racism work in general, of course they're going to continue to be racist towards Indigenous people too. So we have to see that anti-racism work for all people of color include Indigenous as well. Now, of course, then we have to add that bigger picture of colonialism and settler colonialism as the root problem too. So, like it's bigger, but Jesus, if you're not advocating for anti-blackness and that type of racism across the board for all people of color, then that you're just missing the mark for sure. A really funny panel discussion by the city of Calgary happened, and it was called Equity in Action. And everybody came up to me after and said, why was there not one First Nation on that panel? Because they talked like they're all about reconciliation. And I laughed so hard because while we were there, I was trying to encourage them because, like, here we are, the city in a national conference with a few folks from across the country wanting to know what it is they're doing when it comes to reconciliation work, when it comes to equity work. And I thought they kind of missed the mark. So I would try to brag for them. But at the end of the day, we all know that the Indigenous relations team wasn't even allowed at the conference. Like, I can't stress enough the lack of amount of Indigenous people that were there. We are talking about some of the most conservative, privileged mayors and councilors across the city or across the country, almost none of them people of color. I'll bet you I counted 12 people that were people of color in the entire conference. There was like 3,100 people there, like 3,000 people there. And yeah, almost all white, all of them. So it was kind of interesting. I did meet two racialized women from the Yukon, from the city of Whitehorse, and one was the first Indigenous woman who was elected as well. And yeah, I can't thank Miranda, Jimmy, and the Confederacy of Treaty 6 enough for having me come there. Basically, Miranda's boss couldn't come, so thankfully I got her ticket. That's how it went down. And I do wish that like this is a great example of teaching for anti-Indigenous bias. Why it is that all of the over 600 nations across this country, why they aren't at this is the showing of segregation that is still rampant in our country. So until I see like a minimum 600 representatives of Indigenous people from each nation at this conference, like, because our chiefs are the same thing as a mayor. Well, that's not true. And backpedal. It's like the prime minister is for the entire country of settler colonialism, but each chief is like a nation. So, we should be having a lot more folks at these tables because we're always downstream from all of these municipalities. There should be that intergovernmental collaboration working anyway, and there isn't. So the segregation is so rampant and clear right there. And supposedly every municipality is like, oh my God, we're so about reconciliation. But like, there was a handful of us that were Indigenous. I did see Aaron Paquette. He did come. I seen him really quickly for a brief moment, and I thought I'd have a chance to chat with him more, but it just didn't work out. So, it was lovely to see a few folks. I this is a wild story. My bridesmaid married the mayor of Kingston. So I got to meet the mayor of Kingston. We took selfies and I sent it to her. And I just thought it was so funny how that worked out. So anyway, I was really glad I went. The prime minister showed up. At one point in time, I recorded the whole thing. So if you want to listen to the whole thing, it is on my YouTube channel. I kept it recorded and it's going to stay up there. And I thought he did great personally. I found there was so much bias towards conservatism. They had the conservative fellow who has a portfolio of municipalities there, former mayor. And boy, the president sure liked him and just went on and on about him. And the conservative who spoke, he talked so much about the Fraser Institute, which we all know is a conservative think tank for conservatism, as opposed to, you know, what's in the best interest of all Canadians. So anyway, it was very interesting to watch. I'm going to tell you, I, as an Indigenous person, visibly Indigenous, were treated like crap by Justin Trudeau's RCMP security detail. There was this one guy who was right in front of this one area that was supposed to be designated for Indigenous people. And it was supposed to be a safe space for us to smudge and relax. But it actually was, and I feel so bad for this Indigenous liaison who was working there. It really became a, oh my God, I'm a conservative municipal councillor or mayor who's never ever read about Indigenous people ever. And I don't know what the TRC is, nor the MMIW report. So let me pick your brain about how I can help Indigenous people in my area, because I don't even think I've ever met one. Yeah. So I felt really bad for that Indigenous liaison, because I know that's just racial battle fatigue for however long the conference was, what, 4 days? Poor thing. So there were a few racist things that happened to us women of color. So we went in there, had a smudge, and after the smudge, we left. But Justin security detail, of course, was stationed right in front of it. So, like, I always, in good faith, try to interact with them. And of course, this one guy was such a prick. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how it's going to be. So that was it. I just had no time or patience for all of them. Because if one is going to be that shitty, like, they all have earpieces, they all know what's being said, it's all being recorded, dicks. And they chose to not behave in good faith when talking to someone. So I'm like, okay, fine. So when he came on, they have to do like sweeps, bomb sweeps and such when Justin comes around. And so they did that, and then we all rushed to listen to him. And we had a racist thing happen. But that's not my story to tell, because it didn't happen to me directly. But I'll tell you, there were two Dene women, one from Yukon and one from me, me, and we were gonna stand there until this Black woman was allowed into the conference. It was really disgraceful, and I know it was run by the city of Calgary. So way to go, city of Calgary, for being anti-Black again, and totally, oh my God, we're so not racist. And it's like, yeah, you are, because that's what you just did. You let the white guys in, but not this Black woman. So anyway, it was really disappointing, because once again, the TELUS Convention Center and the city, in collaboration, chose to be anti-Black. So, you know, to the how many, there was like 3 of them there. My God, so embarrassing for frickin' Calgary again. Anyway, I do want to give a shout out to Acorn. We had a few activists outside of the convention center, and they were trying to raise the issue of rent control. So hats off to Acorn. And I just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. To me, it's always fun to kind of throw popcorn at the city. In this case, for sure, Alberta. Because it was in Alberta, it was hosted by the Alberta wing of the Canadian municipalities. So we got to see, I think he's the mayor of Wetaskiwin. He's been on Ryan Jesperson a few times, him talk as well. So anyway, yeah, I wish more people knew about this conference and were able to attend, but it is expensive. Like, it's like $1,800 or $2,000. I don't know. It was a stupid amount. So anyway, so the next day, Justin was in town for the Friday, and that video I took and put up there. Well, the next day on Saturday, we had a campaign college for the Liberal Party. So Justin and his goons were there too. And yeah, once again, like, because they chose to not be in good faith, I was the only Indigenous person there. And like this other guy had his big elbow in my face. And it was like, could you be more obvious you're being hostile to the one native there? But that's the RCMP. What do you expect? They're just dicks when it comes to Indigenous people, because that's why they exist, so that they could police us. And every Canadian is just like, oh my God, I had no idea, because they've never read the history, apparently, of where they grew up. So, yeah, so it was interesting hearing Justin and Mark Miller was there and George DeHall. They were all there. And really wasn't anything that wouldn't be public to anybody anyway. But I do know I probably, I just, I don't think there was anything interesting that would be to tell you all. It really was just like all the parties do this, not just ours, where we get our youth and we try to encourage them, and we, try to get ready for the next election. That's what it is. So it was just a really exciting moment. For some people, it was their first time meeting Justin. So they got their pictures and their selfies, and he was really generous with his time. He spent at least 2 hours with us. And then Mark Miller spent a lot of time with us too, and he was quite generous about it. I seen Stephen Carter there. He wouldn't mind me telling you I seen him there because he is working on the campaign to try to keep the Humboldt Bronco truck driver in the country. So for folks who may not know about that, the fellow who killed all of those hockey players and permanently disabled some that lived, he's the deportation order has been put out, and he is supposed to leave. I guess he has a son who has health issues, and his wife and his son would obviously have to leave. He's very much been very sorry about it. He never appealed a thing in any of it. He served his time, and he just wants to move on with his life. But unfortunately, now he's supposed to be deported. And I just tell people, well, if you're white and you kill somebody drunk driving, and the families are upset about it, and you never say sorry, you can be premier of Saskatchewan, just like Scott Moe, and because that's true. So to me, this is an issue of racism. You have, Scott Moe, who's a white guy who can kill somebody and get away with it in that sense, and he didn't have to serve the time that this guy had to. So I think there's a lot of more people across the political spectrum that are fighting to try to keep him in, and I know George DeHall has been on the record trying to keep him as well, because he's in our constituency. So, or in his constituency. George doesn't actually represent me, but because he's like the only liberal MP, I see him as my guy too. But I'm just south of his riding. Anyway, if you agree, I got the Reconciliation Action Group to put out a statement, because we talk about anti-racism, and clearly this is an issue about racism when it comes to this driver. So we wanted to put out a letter of support, and and just put it out there to support George and anybody else who's trying to encourage this fella to stay. That wasn't even on my list of things to talk about, but that was what happened at the camping college. So I don't know what parties you are all affiliated with, but now's the time to start getting active again, because the campaigns or the election's the next federal election is next year. So we all got to get our candidates. We all got to start fundraising. We all got to get ready for the next election. So something I got really sad about all week was, two different things. Angela Whitney is the former Calgary police HR person, and she was trying to blow the whistle about how sexist and horrible the work culture, toxic the work culture is at the Calgary police. And so the judge in her case about posting social media posts ordered her to take down the posts. And she put out, her lawyers actually put out a really great statement about, this is about whistleblowing, this is about the public interest, this is about public safety. And I really encourage people to read that, because I think it's important to understand the gravity of this. It also said something to the effect, the judge said, well, you can go to the police commission and air your grievances with them. But according to the statement, she actually wasn't allowed to. So at least now she can. So her lawyers are trying to frame this as a win. But I'll tell you, for me, it's just like, hey, misogyny wins again. Yay! Thank you, Alberta Justice. Always back in misogyny. Woohoo! Yay for Alberta. And the other thing that came up that made me super sad was Lachour's ACERT report came out. And shocking, police that investigate police never find any wrongdoing. And yeah, I think I'm just sitting and reflecting on it, letting his family put out their statements. Obviously, Taylor McNally of the Black Lives Matter movement has put out some tweets about it as well, and we absolutely support their voice because they have been the number one supporters of the family while going through this horrific issue of being shot. So, for folks who may not know, Lashore was South Sudanese or a Sudanese child soldier, had PTSD, was having a mental health crisis. And the police, in all of their wonderfulness, they know better. The Sudanese community had been working with the Calgary police for over 10 years on issues of understanding child soldier trauma, and they just let that all go out the window and claimed like, oh my god, I had no idea that dogs just escalate a situation. And it's like, yes you did, yes you do. And it's not like they didn't tell you this, but basically they shot and killed him. And they said, well, because he stabbed the dog, that's why, because it's like stabbing a police officer. And it was actually on Twitter, I retweeted it. Somebody had said basically his life is lesser than a dog. And that's the bottom line when it comes to this. So that made me really sad because, once again, depending on the color of your skin depends on your status in the society. And unfortunately, they just ACERT is disgraceful. It's disgusting. Alberta Justice, same thing. I have zero respect for any of them. Recently found out an Indigenous friend of mine had applied to be there, and if anything, is overqualified to be there, just to be turned down. But I know they just want ex cops, in ACERT. So it's a joke, and I find it really sad and pathetic that the average Albertan doesn't understand the gravity of it. So, and for an Indigenous person, we have no mechanism of accountability. Both the TRC and the National Inquiry address that, but most Canadians will never read either report, so they don't care. So to me, I was really sad that these two rulings came out, because I just shows the inequity and the gendered violence and the racism in both. I did want to let everyone know. So today is June 15th. Tomorrow's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all of the fathers out there. I did want to say that this week coming up is kind of the big week of, like, free hot dogs and free events for Indigenous people. If you go to Aboriginal awareness events in Calgary, you will find all the events that are listed. And yes, we still use the word Aboriginal in Calgary. The person who's kind of in charge of it, they always say, well, what are they calling us today? Because they've gone through, Indian, Aboriginal, Indigenous. They're like tired of it. And so they don't even want to become Indigenous. They don't want to call it Indigenous awareness. And whatever, I don't care. It is what it is. So Aboriginal awareness events in Calgary, look it up and you can come join us. Our big event is our big cap powwow is on Saturday, the 22nd. Excuse me, I suddenly got the hiccups. So on June 22nd at the powwow, I'll be there as well as volunteering. And yeah, love to see everybody. There's going to be hand games, like all sorts of fun stuff. I hope you come. But also on that day will be the final results for the Alberta NDP leadership. So noon is when all the voting is done. And so if you haven't voted yet, You have very limited time to get your vote in. On Monday is when you can get your ballot in through the mail. If it's not like um postmarked for Monday's date, then it's not going to get counted. So you can call or you can go online. And if you're like, oh my God, I haven't got my ballot, just call them. They're going to be open from 9 to 5 tomorrow, Saturday, like Saturday, Sunday, all the way up until the 22nd. And then they'll be open and available until noon. And then that way voting's closed. So I hope you got your ballot. I hope you are voting and may the best candidate win. And it's really hard when you're like, yeah, they're all pretty good. So anyway, I've spent a few hours for one candidate particular because I hope that having some new blood in there might fire a few folks personally. I'd love to see a brown man in leadership role because I really think, as you all know from my previous podcasts, a little bit more anti-racism work is very necessary in that party. Anyway, I also wanted to bring up something that I'm a little stressed out about actually. It's there's a walk that's going to be happening, and it's called the Walk for Justice. It's an event that's on Facebook as well. I've been sharing some of the posters, but basically they're walking from Edmonton down to Calgary. And so if you're not following Nick Stoney Lamouche on Insta and Facebook, that's the person really running it. Punk Indigenous on Insta. They are planning to start in Edmonton at the legislative grounds at 9 a.m. on the 23rd. So that's the Sunday. And they're going to open that up. Then they're going to go down to the Peter Bull Memorial Center for the 24th. They plan to be in Red Deer City Hall for the 25th. And then by the 30th, they're planning to be at the McDougall here in Calgary for 6 p.m. And now why I'm stressing out about it is because I agreed to do the Sacred Fire for 4 days while they're here in Calgary. So right now we have a fire ban. So that's part of the reason why I'm hoarding all my water. Apparently, if I do a permit through the city, I might be able to get away with a ceremonial permit to do. And I think it's the 22nd or the 21st is actual the full moon. So I need to do it for that alone. And then if I can get it done for this walk, then hopefully yeah, we can do the Sacred Fire for that. And that's in collaboration with many different organizations. So we want to make sure it all comes together. So, anyway, I really hope that anyone who listens to my podcast across Alberta supports this walk. It's important to me that families of missing or murdered Indigenous exploited people, get heard and that people understand the gravity of this. Oh, yes, my yearly Narcan issues. So, for folks who follow me on social media, you should be aware of it. This happens, every year at least, where I have to get a new prescription for Narcan from a doctor so that the pharmacy will allow me to continue to get my Narcan a day. And I can't understand why it is that people can't see the systemic racism. They're quick to be a white savior and be like, oh my God, I can so get you Narcan. And I'm like, that's not the fucking point. Please listen to me. The point is, I'm supposed to be able to access this. But here I am, housed Indigenous suburban mom out in this, satellite parts of Calgary. I'm not in active addiction, and I have all these barriers of accessing Narcan. We can't claim that we want to save Indigenous lives. The reports just came out about how disproportionate the amount of Indigenous lives are being lost in this drug crisis. And these are the barriers I face. If I'm facing that, how is an unhoused person in active addiction with no ID going to go to a doctor and get a prescription and work with a pharmacist and get that pharmacist to give them their medication? Like, explain that to me. because I think it's ridiculous. And the fact that most Canadians are like, oh my God, well, in Nova Scotia or Ontario, it's, I can just get it. I'm like, yeah, you can. Not here in Alberta. It shouldn't be this hard. And yet here we are. I just have no idea how it is so many Indigenous people are dying of the drug crisis. Like, I can't even, I can't have these conversations with people. I don't understand how it is people are like so committed to being deaf on this subject. So anyway, if you are just a podcast listener, I do put some of this information up on my socials. So if you want to learn more about it, please do message me if you have more questions, and we'll go from there. And of course, the reason why this matters so much is what our recent past guest, Casper Howard, has unfortunately passed away. And have a listen to that podcast in memorial. And when I find out more about any services, I'll let the folks know. But basically, anybody who's doing street outreach, they knew him. He did all that great work for folks once he was working on his sobriety. But unfortunately, we have now lost him. So from Native Calgarian podcast, my deepest condolences to all of his friends and family, and to the person who reached out to me via my socials. I just thank you from the bottom of my heart to let me know that that had happened. And when I find out more, of course, I'll let everybody else know. My book club, we had a wonderful book club, Two Spirit by Alicia Two Bears. Very emotional for me because our elder Sharon, we talked about her, so I cried a little. um this is a big part of why I think my child is so happy to come out in the way they do, because when your first elder in sweat lodge and ceremony is Two Spirit and speaks so openly and good about being Two Spirit and how sacred it is, yeah, that influences you for life. And so I'm really honored I got to know Sharon at all, and really honored that my sweat sister, Alicia Two Bears, and I could talk about it and talk about her beautiful book. I highly recommend it. It's funny, when I was growing up, I hated poetry. But after Lee Marigold's book, I Am Woman, and now this book by Alicia Two Bears called Two Spirit, it's just that the poetry didn't resonate at all until I read two Indigenous women doing poetry. And now I just found it so inspiring. So I hope you enjoyed that book club. I'll probably be putting up in the next couple of weeks, and going from there. Hope you pick up the book too and write a great review. The next book we're going to be doing is Truth Telling by Michelle Good. I hope that she can join us, but unfortunately, all I can do is send her the Zoom link. So if you want to join us, please do just message me and I will give you the Zoom link. I'm proud that this podcast gives solutions and includes cultural safety training and cultural first aid in all of them, to create a safer space for Indigenous peoples, people of color, those with disabilities, and to us LGBTQ to speak. According to the 2023 Quality of Life Report from the Calgary Foundation, 88% of racialized Calgarians feel uncomfortable or out of place because of their religion, ethnicity, skin color, culture, language, accent, gender, or sexual orientation, up from 75% in 2022. 84% of racialized Calgarians believe racism exists, as opposed to only 66% of non-racialized Calgarians. I want to give a shout out to Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fritkin of heretohelp.ca, heretohelp.bc.ca. My apologies. What is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it? I hope that you're all listening and you all have taken it. Their work and their cultural action tools are available, so please support Indigenous work like that as a part of your reconciliation and settler understandings. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat them here. Internalized racism or lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and equity deserving folks experience by the structure of oppression imposed on these lands. Donna Bevins has a wonderful website of racialequitytools.org and millions of resource files, including one that is What is Internalized Racism? So if you need some reading, there it is for you, friends. Do's and Don'ts for Bystander Intervention by American Friends Service Committee, afsc.org. You know, it was interesting. I was on the C train yesterday, and there was a Muslim woman, and there was a white man right behind her, and he bumped her hard. And, she looked at me, and I looked at her, and he was just a dick. She sat with me, and I was kind of angled that I could take a picture of him. So I did. And I said, would you like me to text it? And she's like, no, it's okay. And I was just kind of like, I understood and respect her. And I just know as women of color in Calgary, like we just have to put up with that fucking bullshit all the time. And he knew I was watching. And I said, I seen it. And I said it loud enough so that he knew I seen it. And and she was really graceful, of course, and texting just texting away. So I'm sure she had her circle of family and friends that she was telling about the incident. And I just wish more people would stand with somebody who's being marginalized, because it's not okay. And yet it happens all the time that she accepts it. And when it happens to me, I have to accept it. And it's not okay. Me and the RCMP detail of the prime minister, like fucking dicks. But nobody stood beside me. I don't even know if they see it because they never see racism. So anyway, if you see or experience racism, you can report it at acttoendracism.ca or text at 587-507-3838. And of course, I would never report something like that without that person's consent. So I didn't. I wish other people who follow me on my socials would watch the anti-racism organizational lead for the city of Calgary do a presentation to the committee on the journey of becoming an anti-racism leader, because if you're not working on it, then you're not helping. Back to the Calgary Black Lives Matter activists Taylor McNally and Adora Newford being legally targeted. They're actually talking about Taylor's upcoming court appearance that has to happen. So we're all hoping that you will come and support, follow Stop the Stack YYC if you don't know what I'm talking about, and to learn more. Indigenous people have been talking about these issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize the equity deserving groups in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they are cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to that party directly negatively impacts equity deserving groups. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to actions on the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, multiple reports about child welfare reform every year, the violence prevention, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit. Provincially in Alberta, the government created 113 pathways to justice, and I have yet to see the new Premier's Council on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls do any work on that. Municipally, we have the White Goose Flying Report, and I'm sure you remember my last two episodes about the Indigenous gathering place. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, and sexism, they literally have zero business running. It should be understood by all parties, local politicians, community organizations, sports clubs, and business. Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians can become allies, because there are tons of them. Also, the Calgary Foundation has a wonderful ally toolkit if you're want to learn more. Go to calgaryfoundation.org and just look up their ally toolkit. Stephanie Harp and I had an emergency podcast a year and a half ago to try to get our allies to right about the housing crisis that we're having. Now it's like, oh my God, it's everybody. It's not just Indigenous. And it's like, yeah, but it's worse for Indigenous. Um, you can also sign up at aboriginalalert.ca to find out the latest missing people that there are. And Missing Children of Society of Canada is also trying to share more Indigenous content. So you can download their app. Demand urgent action to protect the lives of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people experiencing homelessness. That was a year and a half ago at womenshomelessness.ca. And now it's a huge housing crisis for everybody. Uh-huh. Thanks for not supporting us then, so we can move this forward sooner. Jeez. The province has published data for July of last year, updated the June figure, and we've already climbed 5.3% in the drug crisis issue. So just to give you some updated information, updated by year. So drug poisoning deaths in 2016 was 688, 688 too many. In 2023, 2,550. So 2050. Great. And that's over 10,000 deaths since 2016 when you add up every year after that, too. So a huge shout out to Twitter for that information. I retweeted it. So if you know somebody who is using substances, encourage them not to use alone. If you are using alone, there is the National Overdose Response Service at 888-688-NORS, or you can download the Brave, Doors, or Lifeguard apps to help make you a plan so that you don't die. I strongly support Freedom's Path Recovery Society.ca, where you can donate. They provide free one-on-one addiction counseling services, group treatment for recovery in Calgary. They are queer-friendly and anti-racist. As many of you heard, I've been fully supporting Canada's first 2S LGBTQ addiction recovery center of stonewallrecovery.ca. So if you want to give them money, you can give them money. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything I talked about today and need to talk, you can call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 855-242-3310. It is toll free and open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They also have a website, hopeforwellness.ca, with one of those little text features. If more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, you can call 844-413-6649. Again, it is a 24/7 crisis call line that helps provide support for anyone requiring emotional assistance relating to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. We also have the 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta, ssisa.ca. And we have the Indian Residential School Survivor and Family Hotline at 866-925-4419. The Kids Help Phone is 1-800-668-6868, or you can text at 686868. And they do have a live chat from 7 p.m. to midnight at Eastern Time. The Native Youth Crisis Line is 877-209-1266. And the LGBTQ Youth Line no longer exists to call, but you can text at 647-694-4275, or you can go to youthline.ca for more. For non-Indigenous, there are always distress center lines in your area, usually a functioning 211, and the new national number of 988, text 988, or you can go to 988.ca. For 2S LGBTQ crisis supports available in most areas across Canada, you can go to the number 2, spirits.org. That is more of a Toronto area support group. So I recommend that you call the MMIW hotline that I said before. But if you're American, you can call the Two-Spirit Identity Strong Hearts Helpline, and that is 844-7-NATIVE or 844-762-8433. And their website is strongheartshelpline.org. It Gets Better Canada.org has tons of resources for 2S LGBTQ+. Just a warning, the QT BIPOC that I've seen of some of the orgs listed in Alberta, not all of them practice anti-racism nor have Indigenous education. So again, you may want to try the MMIW line that they have. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is self-care, how I take my power back. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions, as many people do not want to hear Indigenous opinions. They sure like to tell us theirs, even if they know nothing about us or colonialism or the constant surveillance of Indigenous peoples, our protests, our vigils, and our rights. I and many others have shared info daily about racism, so it's just unacceptable anymore. Learn about being trauma informed. Folks like me are dealing with internalized racism, gatekeepers that survive off the status quo, or people who are so in their trauma they stop people from doing the work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for me, other Indigenous folks, and folks with disabilities, QT BIPOC, and others. I want to say masicho to my ancestors, to my granny in heaven, or my mom who's still living, what strength looks like through your example. And thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt. My stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots. We just recently lost a family member, so it's been a little tougher for us all. And I just pray for her right now and that side of the family. I do want to thank her for teaching me how to be a proud Calgarian. Just through her, I am a second generation proud Calgarian. And to my husband, Darcy, Big Buffalo Rock Man, I want to say thank you for producing and editing this show. Obviously, you're my husband, my childhood friend, but as a father of our child, happy Father's Day. And thank you for your support down my journey of the Red Road. You have witnessed decades of racism and sexism, and last week was a tough one because of it. And I know how hard it hurts. So I love you. To our child, and Nanskom Okinaki, Thunderpipe Necklace Woman, we are blessed to learn from you daily. We are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. And we just recently learned, in a way, it kind of annoys me that we had terminology before colonialism, but what they've done is they've taken the term two-spirit and translated that into Dene. So that's the term now we'll be using until we learn what lesbian and Dene is. Anyway, I hope you know that you give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. And I hope my daughter and my family will be proud in the future of trying to understand these present day issues in a way that makes sense. I honor the Blackfoot and the elders. They've been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot and Dene elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd just love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. I also have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. You can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And if you want to do more action, I'm going to give a massive shout out to the Reconciliation Action Group. Last week, we had an Indigenous youth at Diefenbaker that wasn't going to be allowed to wear their beaded cap. And we did a call out, and Justice for Palestinians were going to come join us. And miraculously, the principal changed their mind. Oh, okay, they can wear their beaded cap. And just for everybody's information, Diefenbaker High School has their mascot as the Chiefs. And we have tried to talk to them in good faith to have nothing. So we've done some pretty good call outs to educate the public as to the type of barriers that Indigenous youth are facing, the type of extreme racism that they are facing in the Calgary Board of Education, and we also have talked about the Calgary Catholic School Board and how they have been harmful to our Indigenous youth. I will say right now, like my child's junior high was a fucking hot mess, but their high school experience has been very good. So that we've been lucky, but I just don't think it's right that not everybody gets the same experience of having, an Indigenous liaison, having a safe space for the Indigenous youth to go. And yeah, I'm heartbroken that we aren't there yet as a society. So I just, anyway, follow the Reconciliation Action Group. Please amplify what we're putting out there, because it's a team of us working together, Indigenous led, but people, settlers doing the work. And I'd love to have more people come on board. So please follow us there. So the second last thing I'd like to talk about is a touch grass moment. I talk about a lot of dark things, and I see a lot of stuff on media, social media, that's pretty tough. So touching grass is an expression to reconnect to the world, not focus too much on screens. I'd love to hear about yours if you'd like to send me yours, but I will share. I purchased Katie Lang's limited edition of signed swag, and mine is in the mail. So I'm super excited for that. And I also wanted to send out a huge congratulations to Elder Ruth Scalplock for celebrating 50 years of sobriety and finally gifted a headdress. It was an honor to witness that. And the mayor was there as well, and just wonderful friends and family. And of course, I want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not Tradish. And my beautiful cousin responded, or you be in my dish. Thank you, folks, for listening, as always.